July 2024. A hillside in central Italy, 43 miles northwest of Rome.
Mexico has made some of the most significant archaeological discoveries of the last decade. A 1400-year-old tomb has been discovered by the archaeologists.
A sealed stone slab, untouched since roughly 600 BC, shifts for the first time in 2,600 years. Cold air escapes through the crack, carrying a smell that no living person has ever breathed. The team freezes. Because in Etruscan archaeology, sealed doors mean one of two things. Either you've found the discovery of a lifetime, or you've just broken into something that was sealed for a reason. And then the torchlight hit what was inside. And every archaeologist standing at that entrance understood, immediately, that they were looking at something that should not have survived. This is Italy, central Italy, the rolling hills of the Lazio region, about 70 kilometers northwest of Rome. And beneath the soil here, carved into soft volcanic rock called tufa, hundreds of tombs have been sitting in silence since before the Roman Republic existed. Before Julius Caesar, before the Colosseum. Before Rome was anything more than a cluster of huts on a muddy hill beside the Tiber. These tombs belong to a civilization that most people have never heard of. A civilization that built cities, forged empires, traded across the Mediterranean, invented technologies that Rome would later claim as its own, and then vanished so thoroughly that even their language remains largely undeciphered to this day. They called themselves the Ravenna. The Romans called them the Etrusci. We call them the Etruscans. And until very recently, almost everything we knew about them came from one source: their graves. Because the Etruscans left behind no surviving literature, no philosophy, no histories, no sacred texts. Almost everything scholars have learned about this civilization has been reconstructed from what was buried with their dead, which makes what happened next so devastating. Over the past 2,000 years, nearly every Etruscan tomb in Italy has been looted, systematically, relentlessly. Roman soldiers started stripping them as early as the 3rd century BC, when Rome absorbed Etruscan territory. Medieval treasure hunters continued the work. Then came centuries of organized grave robbing, a trade so profitable in Italy that it has its own vocabulary, its own underworld, its own generational expertise. By the time modern archaeology arrived with its careful brushes and grid systems, the damage was catastrophic. Tomb after tomb, opened and emptied. Artifacts ripped from context, stone beds smashed, frescoes chipped from walls. The dead disturbed, their stories erased. At a site called San Giuliano, a plateau about 43 miles northwest of Rome, a team from Baylor University's San Giuliano Archaeological Research Project has been working since 2016. Over the years, they documented more than 600 tombs carved into the rock surrounding the ancient Etruscan town. Chamber tombs, shaped like small houses with pitched roofs, cut directly into the living stone. 600 tombs, and every single one of them had been looted. Every one. Some had been emptied so long ago that even the stone furniture inside had been broken apart and carried off. And then, in 2024, they found a door that had never been opened. A stone slab, still sealed in place, exactly where Etruscan hands had set it roughly 2,600 years ago. Davide Zori, a professor of history and archaeology at Baylor and the project's principal investigator, lifted it himself. And what he found behind it was everything. 4 skeletons, lying exactly where mourners had placed them in the 7th century BC, each one resting on a carved stone bed. Around them, more than 110 artifacts: ceramic vases, iron weapons, bronze ornaments, and delicate silver hair spirals, still in place, still coiled around strands of hair that had long since turned to dust, but whose position told archaeologists exactly how these people wore their hair on the day they were laid to rest. 2,600 years ago, undisturbed, untouched, frozen in the exact arrangement that the last person to stand in that chamber had left behind, then sealed the door, and walked away into a world that no longer exists. Zori called it the first preserved chamber tomb of this age ever excavated in the region using modern archaeological techniques. Now let me explain why that matters so much. Because the artifacts themselves, the pots, the weapons, the jewelry, those are extraordinary, but they're not the real treasure. The real treasure is context. When a tomb is looted, the objects are taken, but their meaning is destroyed. A bronze brooch in a museum case is beautiful, but a bronze brooch still pinned to the fabric remnants on a skeleton's chest, lying beside an iron sword, across from a woman wearing silver hair spirals, with ceramic vessels arranged in a specific pattern around them. That's not an object. That's a sentence. That's a paragraph. That's a chapter of a story written in placement rather than words, by a civilization that left us no books. And this tomb was still telling that story. Every object was exactly where it had been placed. The spatial relationships were intact. Which body lay closest to which weapon? Which ornaments clustered near which individual? How the ritual arrangement shaped the burial as a whole. Preliminary analysis suggests the 4 individuals may represent 2 male-female pairs, a pattern that, if confirmed, could reshape our understanding of Etruscan family structure. The bones showed signs of arthritis and healed fractures, suggesting these weren't pampered elites, but people who lived long, worked hard, and were honored in death with everything their community could provide. But the San Giuliano tomb wasn't the only sealed Etruscan burial to surface in recent years. And the second one revealed something even more intimate. In October 2023, at the Osteria Necropolis in Volci, another Etruscan city about 90 kilometers northwest of Rome, archaeologists opened a tomb designated Tomb 58. It had been discovered months earlier, its entrance sealed by heavy tufa slabs that had to be removed one at a time. And like the San Giuliano tomb, it was completely intact. Nobody had entered it in 2,600 years. But Tomb 58 was different. It wasn't just a burial, it was a frozen moment, a ritual, interrupted by the sealing of the door, preserved in every detail. Inside, archaeologists found a double chamber carved into the volcanic rock. The first chamber contained 4 Etruscan transport amphorae, filled with locally produced wine. The second chamber held amphorae and ceramics from eastern Greece, Ionia, and Corinth, alongside locally crafted black Bucaro pottery. 2 of the amphorae were identified as likely originating from the island of Chios, which produced what was considered the finest wine in the entire Greco-Roman world. And there was a bronze cauldron, iron implements, ornamental accessories, cups, and something that made the archaeologists go quiet: a tablecloth. A fabric tablecloth, still laid out, from the Etruscan ritual of the last meal. A funerary banquet, set and served and left in place for the dead to dine on in eternity, sealed behind stone for 2.5 millennia. Simona Carosi, the archaeologist in charge of the site, described what it meant. She said the tomb gives us back in an unusual way the actual funerary banquet, as the Etruscans had laid it centuries and centuries ago. Think about that. We're not looking at artifacts in a museum. We're looking at the table, still set. The wine still in the jars. The cloth still spread. The meal prepared for the dead, exactly as it was arranged by living hands in the 7th century BC. And just months earlier, in the same necropolis, another sealed tomb had been opened, revealing something equally astonishing. A bronze brazier, still containing the coals and the skewers that held the meat cooked for the final repast. The meal hadn't just been left, it had been cooked inside the tomb as a last offering. And then, the door was sealed. The skewers were still on the grill. Now, let's talk about who these people actually were. Because the Etruscans aren't just an interesting footnote in Italian history, they are, in many ways, the foundation that Rome was built on, literally and metaphorically. The Etruscan civilization thrived in central Italy from roughly 900 BC to around the 1st century BC. At its peak, around 500 BC, Etruscan territory stretched from the Po Valley in the north to Campania in the south. They built sophisticated cities. They mined metal. They traded across the Mediterranean. They developed an alphabet, adapted from the Greeks, that would eventually evolve into the Latin alphabet, the alphabet you're reading right now. And when Rome was nothing more than a village, the Etruscans ruled it. The last 3 kings of Rome were of Etruscan descent. The Romans didn't just neighbor the Etruscans, they were shaped by them. The arch, one of Rome's most iconic architectural elements, was an Etruscan invention. The toga, borrowed from the Etruscans. The fasces, the bundle of rods symbolizing authority that Roman magistrates carried, Etruscan. Even the word populus, people, is of Etruscan origin. Rome's system of augury and haruspicy, reading the future from bird flights and animal entrails, was adopted wholesale from Etruscan religion. Gladiatorial combat? Etruscan in origin. Chariot racing? Etruscan. Rome's Great Sewer, the Cloaca Maxima, was an Etruscan engineering project. And yet, despite all of this, the Etruscans remain one of the most mysterious civilizations in European history. They spoke a language that belongs to no known language family. Not Indo-European, not Semitic, not related to any of their neighbors' tongues. Scholars have partially deciphered it, enough to read names and simple phrases, but most Etruscan texts remain untranslated. We don't know what stories they told. We don't know what their myths sounded like when spoken aloud. We don't know what prayers they offered to their gods. We know them almost entirely through what they left with their dead, which is why sealed tombs like these matter so much. Every looted tomb is a page torn from the only book this civilization ever wrote. And there's something else about the Etruscans that has fascinated scholars for decades: their treatment of women. In Greek and Roman societies, women were largely excluded from public life, from banquets, from positions of visible authority. But Etruscan tomb art tells a radically different story. Etruscan sarcophagi show husbands and wives reclining together at banquets as equals. Women are depicted attending games, participating in ceremonies, and holding positions of evident social importance. The Greek historian Theopompus was scandalized by it. He wrote disapprovingly that Etruscan women dined alongside men, which no respectable Greek woman would do. The paired burials found at San Giuliano, 2 possible male-female couples interred together with comparable grave goods, may reinforce this picture. If the analysis confirms equal treatment in death, it could provide rare physical evidence of a gender dynamic that was extraordinary for the ancient world. And then there's the question of what these tombs tell us about how the Etruscans saw death itself. Because they didn't treat it the way most ancient cultures did. The Etruscans believed the afterlife was an extension of life on Earth. Not a vague, shadowy underworld. Not a reward or a punishment. A continuation. The dead needed supplies. They needed weapons and tools and jewelry and wine and food. They needed the table set, the meal served, the last banquet prepared with real meat on real skewers over real coals, then sealed inside the tomb so the dead could feast in the darkness forever. The pottery found in these tombs featured spiral motifs believed to symbolize life's continuous cycle, death as a turn in a pattern that never ends. And now, after 2,600 years, we've finally found these banquets exactly as they were left. The tablecloth spread, the wine poured, the meal cooked, the door sealed. The dead left alone with their provisions for eternity, until someone opened the door. Jamie April, co-principal investigator on the San Giuliano project, said the discovery will reshape scholarly discussions about Etruscan cultural development. And Davide Zori noted that significant finds like these result from patience, persistence, and collaborative effort, rather than dramatic moments of revelation. But for anyone watching those stone slabs being removed, one at a time, from a doorway that hadn't been opened since the century when the Buddha was alive and Pythagoras was working out his theorem, the moment was anything but ordinary. Kendall Peterson, a student on the project, described the experience as surreal, not just for what the tomb contained, but for the reaction it sparked in the local community of Barberano Romano, whose ancestors those 4 skeletons may actually be. People whose family lines stretch back, unbroken, to the civilization that built the tomb in the first place. An Etruscan tomb was opened after 2,600 years. What was inside had never been touched. Not by looters, not by time, not by the Roman soldiers who conquered the land above it, not by the medieval farmers who plowed the fields, not by the treasure hunters who emptied every chamber around it. 4 people, lying on stone beds, wearing silver in their hair, surrounded by everything they were expected to need for a journey that has no destination we can name. And a table, set for a meal that was never eaten, waiting in the dark for guests who will never arrive. Until now.